Why startups entrepreneurs need a home or a community. I wanted to bring this special episode for startup founders all around the world just to highlight one thing. I think there's this phenomenon when we really look at communities and startups, we think a little bit, a lot more even, about Silicon Valley, Silicon Fen, Cambridge, London. But what if you're a startup founder or you are an entrepreneur in the tech community and you don't live next to one of those hubs? So what I really wanted to do today is to shine the light on other amazing communities that we have, especially in the UK, so that entrepreneurs can go and find knowledge, inspiration, accountability from them. And of course, there's also a special conference coming up just in a few weeks, and I don't want you to miss out. So I thought, why not bring today in this show Nikki Davis, Director and Head of Marketing at Software Cornwall. Yes, we know and love Cornwall for the beach, the sea, the clean air. But there's more, especially when it comes to the tech community. Software Cornwall is a not-for-profit organization that represents one of the fastest growing tech clusters in the UK. Software Cornwall connects, promotes, represents, and supports Cornwall digital tech community. This year, Software Cornwall is bringing Europe's most distinguished tech startup event, Slush in the UK for the very first time in collaboration with Liverpool. Mark the date in your calendar, Thursday, the 14th of September in Newquay, Cornwall. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naily Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and startup advisor, I will answer live the burning question that you have on your journey to Series A+. Subscribe and connect every week for top tips to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Nikki, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to finally be able to shout about the conference that's happening in Cornwall. Do you want to let us know a little bit more what Software Cornwall is, and then we'll dive in a bit more about what the conference will be about?
Thanks, Naily, and thanks for the warm introduction. You took words right out of my mouth. I think that's probably one of the best intros I've had. As you touched on, Software Cornwall are essentially a tech cluster group. So we're a not-for-profit membership organisation, and we look after the digital, software and tech communities in Cornwall. And as you said, Cornwall is one of the fastest growing tech clusters in the UK. People do think that it's just beaches, pasties and holidays down here. But actually, what a lot of people don't know is we've got the fastest internet in the UK because all the cables come across the Atlantic and into Cornwall. And because of that, and because of our rich history in mining, we are steeped in innovation. We have a very innovative culture and we live out on the edge. So all of these sort of communication issues we have, because it's very rural here, local people do a lot to kind of solve those. And therefore we've got this culture of innovation locally because we just know how to solve problems. As part of Software Cornwall, we founded as a peer group for entrepreneurs and in the software companies that really wanted to find their peers and find people with like-minded thoughts and issues and the same challenges so that they could support each other. And one of the biggest things they realized that they all had in common was that access to talent was the hardest thing for each of them to help them grow. And they realized Cornwall's really far away. We don't have a lot of people passing the door in Cornwall. So it's either, inspire local young people or people to career switch locally, or grow your own, or try and attract people from the rest of the UK and worldwide. So
that's actually very interesting. And I think that's one of the questions I had for you as well, is how, as a budding entrepreneur, how do you build a team when you are so far away from the main hubs?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the team here basically took a grow your own approach, recognizing that it was really hard to attract talent, and that, we're behind Bristol in terms of a gateway almost to the southwest, and people think that Bristol is the southwest, but it's a 3-hour drive from here, which in the UK is quite a long way.
It is.
And so we kind of made the decision, well, okay, let's go and inspire children in schools to show them that there are really great careers in tech here, to show them that you don't have to be a mathematician or a computer scientist to have a job in tech, that you also need really creative people who can speak to other people who can communicate really well, or design things, or break things, or analyze data, whatever it may be in tech as well. And so we started putting on education outreach work experience programs, which are now award-winning. We've got young people who went through those programs in 2014, 2015, 16, who are taking up roles in tech companies locally, and then they come back and volunteer. And we run these programs every half-term holiday, and we have just got this massive community now where actually young people are coming back to teach other young people, and they're learning those skills and recognizing they either want to go on to tertiary education to get a role in tech, or they want to take maybe an apprenticeship or work experience. And so we built this membership organization to kind of close the loop on that community. And so we've got sort of 80 member companies involved. They volunteer with us. They go around and inspire young people, and they come and talk at our events. And then in a few years' time, perhaps actually they're the ones that are applying for those sort of junior roles and taking up roles. So it's an ecosystem that's taken a while to build, but actually we've proven that it works. But it's a long game.
It's actually amazing, and it's interesting to see how you are bringing together everything from those who are already in education or already in work even, and they are coming up with new ideas. They need that support in terms of where do I go next, the people to talk to when they have the challenges, all the way to who are coming in, and even before they even ready to come in, how do we kind of grow these talents close to us so that once they come in, they can then fill the jobs. And I love what you've mentioned about the maths, especially when it comes to software, because I think when we talk about tech, as you rightly said, there's this misconception that tech has to be about coding and coding has to be about maths. And I remember myself when I was younger, because I'm still young, when I was younger and I was studying for my H&D software development just before I went in and studied software engineering at university, I kept on thinking, oh, I don't have an A-level maths. I need an A-level maths. So I took an evening study just to learn maths. And I can tell you that from day one of my career, I was programming C++, Java, and the rest. Until now, I'm now in leadership, but I've never had to use maths at all. So I can imagine the number of young people out there that, like me, were panicking because maybe they don't have math and didn't even study it, and maybe you went through another direction. So it's nice to see the work that you are doing to go to first say, hey, we need you. There's a lot more to do there. That is not just coding, and maths might not be relevant for whichever area or path that you would like to take.
Exactly. And that's a real, it was a eye-opener to me when we had that conversation ourselves. And what's really amazing about the education programs that we run is we get a fairly even split between young girls and young boys taking part in them. And we find that boys generally want to take part because they think they're going to go in to build games. And girls don't want to take part because they think they're going to go and build games. Yes. so we have this sort of disconnect, and it's part of our job to dispel all the myths, and actually we make sure we get an equal volunteer group of females as well to show that women are in tech as well, and and actually we can kind of inspire that generation to sort of say there's actually a lot of purpose-driven stuff you can do in tech. You can really solve problems. We're doing more now in things like sustainability and climate change, because it is creating a new audience, and especially the generation, they really care. They know that the future of the planet is in sort of dire straits, and they want to do something about it, and they recognize that tech is an enabler for that. It's been a really exciting journey, and hopefully we're just getting started.
Yes. And in fact, talking about some of the tech challenges, I know that you've, of course, we talk a little bit more about your career as well, because I find it fascinating myself, because you've been in startups as well, and being on the other side, supporting startups and events. So there's a lot to unpack there. But one of the things that I know, obviously, is part of the work that you do, when looking at the tech community and the startup community, there are quite a lot of challenges that entrepreneurs face. We've already mentioned a little bit on the team. Where do we find the people to come and grow? So are there other challenges that you've seen a lot in your work or as part of the community in Cornwall?
Yeah, certainly. growing talent, accessing talent is always the number one, and it seems to be in any business, and it seems to be exacerbated in the last few years, certainly in the UK, for various reasons, which I won't touch on today. But and I think we're seeing more people also wanting to career switch in tech. So we've just introduced a career switcher program, and to give you one example, we ran an 8-week program in the evening, very light touch, but it was just an overview of things like agile principles or behavior driven development, a bit of user experience. Some of the, we're not going to teach somebody to code Python in 8 weeks in an evening class, where they're going to come out a complete expert, but we can give them a taste of what it's like and help them see firstly whether they enjoy it, and B, whether they've got the sort of aptitude for it, so that employers know that they've got something that actually they can be taught. Because what we're hearing from our members is we can teach somebody to code. What we can't teach is somebody to show up at work on time and get on with the team and, get involved and really get our purpose. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to sort of bridge that gap, I suppose, and help find those people. We've actually just had a woman who has been a GP a really long time and has got very despondent with medicine. She's just taken up a role in AI with one of our local companies, Southwest Water. And she's been through our program and she's fascinated by AI. She's a bright woman who actually has now just been literally headhunted by this company. And she's at the very beginning of her journey in tech. And to touch on the sort of women in tech thing, and to give you another example, we've got a sister organization of us, Tech Women, who they've just grown and grown and grown. And we're big friends with us. We sort of started as one, and they've branched out now, so they're official CIC. They run a program called Digital Uplift locally, and it's for women to help them career switch in tech, but it's very, very early entry. So the idea is they do the sort of Digital Uplift program, and then perhaps they join our career switcher program afterwards. And they had 40 places on the first program that went immediately. They had a wait list of 50 women. They've launched another cohort, and there's another 50 women on the wait list for the next cohort. And I stood up at one of our tech conferences last quarter, and I said, look, we're not short of talent. What we're short of, and there are people banging on the door to work in tech. There are women banging on the door to work in tech, but they need flexibility that isn't just a line in a contract that says, yeah, we're flexible workers, but actually we need you here between 10 and 5. We need flexibility. They need it's perhaps up to employers to consider whether they actually offer flexible working or remote working or job share, and then they can solve their talent crisis. We are not short of people. We are short of flexible employers that are willing to kind of open the door and change the way they do things.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I had this conversation with, as part of a networking event I went to recently in Cambridge, and we were talking about how there are so many mixed messages that it's hard for people, especially those getting into tech, to know whether it's worth it. Because first you hear about all those all of the big companies are laying people off, and of course there's a recession coming, or it's already here. The message changes every week, so I'm never sure about that. But there's the fact that there's a lot of layoff, and then at the same time there's a shortage of talent. And I guess the third thing that makes everything more complicated is this idea of people want more flexibility, not just because it's a perk, but because it really helps to kind of catalyze someone and really make the most of a person at work, whether you are a mother or not, whether you have different hobbies, whether you are even early bird. I mean, I worked in tech company of my life, and I was lucky enough that in my first job, I had flexibility. We had core hours, but the core hours were something like 11 even, 11 to about 2 p.m., which I think is fair enough. But I could come to work at 7:30 and leave at 3 p.m. because I'm an early riser, and then I will do JCI and more volunteering in the evening. But it's because it's what I wanted, and I felt like it made me more productive. Now, when we start talking about even moving that a step further, right now we are looking at remote working. So I've seen a lot of adverts out there that will say, oh, we are hybrid working as long as it's 9 to 5 and Monday to Wednesday or something like that. And you need to be in the office 2 days a week, which might not work, especially if you're already struggling to hire locally. So is this something, the rise of remote / hybrid, is something that you also see a lot that's a bit of a headache within the Software Cornwall community?
Yeah, it certainly is. And it was a really hot topic with everybody coming out of the pandemic. I think the interesting thing with Cornwall, try and paint this picture. There's a lot of cities, and I've worked in cities before, and cities are donut shaped, and they're nice and round. Everything happens in the middle, and you live on the outskirts, and everyone can get to everything in the middle. So you know, as long as you pinpoint the middle bit, everyone can meet up. Cornwall is shaped like a chocolate eclair. So we're really, really long, and it takes, because of our road network, it takes a really long time to get from one end of the eclair to the other. We don't have, even though we have Truro as a city, we don't have necessarily one central convenient point for everybody to convene. And so we've sort of always had a little bit of a culture of there has to be some flexibility, because if you do get stuck behind a tractor on one of those roads, you are there for a really long time. It's impossible to get anywhere. Our train network's bizarre. So, you know, I suppose we've always had it a little bit. And the other interesting thing we've got in Cornwall is we do have a culture of work and play. The county we live in is beautiful. It's very, you can pretty much from any high point in Cornwall, you can see the sea from one coast to the other. We're really lucky to be at the beach in 40 minutes, even if you're in the most landlocked part of Cornwall. And I think because of that, a lot of people move here because there is a lifestyle change. There is a slower pace, and people don't want to be, you know, sat at 4 o'clock on a really hot sunny day in a dark, cramped office. And so a lot of the founders here are very aware of that, and they don't want to be, you know, they want to be out walking the dog at 4 o'clock. And I've heard the same from teachers running schools, like they don't want to be inside at 4 or 5 o'clock. They want to be out on the beach. And so we do, we have the benefit of, there is a slightly different way of thinking here, where there is a bit of flexibility, so people can make the most of the lifestyle here. But having said that, I worked remotely for a startup for 6 years. I lived in Cornwall. The startup was London based. And I would sort of get the train up for a week, once every 8 weeks, to go and have a week in the office with the team, and it worked really well. As things got more intense, as it does in a startup, that, you know, 1 week every 2 months became a week every month, and then it became 2 weeks every month, then a week. And then I realized on a Monday morning every week I was getting on a train to London, and then on Friday lunchtime I was leaving London to get the train home, and I was just in Cornwall for the weekend, which is actually quite a common existence for a lot of the commuters in Cornwall. You know, there's I love getting the train. I can sit on the train 4.5 hours. It's a really beautiful journey across the coast all the way into Paddington. But you can fly in 50 minutes. It is commutable. It's shorter than most tube rides in London to go between Cornwall and London. And so there is that sort of measure of hybrid learning. But
actually, in addition to that, just not to scare people off thinking that Cornwall is really far and you don't want to commute it, for those who don't want to commute every week and spend most of the time not at home, I would also say that things have changed a lot since the pandemic. I think the tools that we have today, the things that we can do as a team, and the way we can brainstorm is very different. Yes, the face-to-face aspect of working with a team and brainstorming is still very important, I would say. But you know, I work with startups where I was flying maybe once a month or once every 2 months, because I've got this weird lifestyle where I'm sometimes in Madrid and sometimes in Cambridge. Those are my 2 homes at the moment. But then again, you know, I could, like, September going to be crazy because I'm keynote speaker in New York. I'm going to be in Cornwall to speak at your conference, and I'm going to be in Liverpool at another conference, and then I'm going to be God knows where again, because there's another couple of things I'm doing. So I'm all over the place, but at the same time, I'm still working with clients, and because we have more tools that bring us together, as long as you don't forget. And how do we prioritize the moments when we are together? What type of work do we do when we are a team versus when we are all located in whatever niche we have? You know, I even work with people up in Scotland. You know, obviously I grew up in Glasgow, but now I'm down either in Cambridge or Madrid. But I can't really go up to Scotland all the time because obviously it costs as well of the trains. But it really works. And I think it's about, even as a startup, people say, oh no, you all have to be together. Well, life is not as, you know, it's not always possible to do what you want to do. There's a lot of limitation as a startup, and budget. Even if you want to be in London, God, imagine traveling in London, and the cost of, as a startup founder, of just funding everybody to be locally might not be possible. So I would say that definitely there are ways startup can grow and evolve even when they are remotely based.
Definitely. And I think a lot of it is down to company culture and, you know, who's in leadership, because certainly for our team, we start up very small, as you do. And then I think at our biggest, we got sort of 40, 50 people. We had some changes in leadership, and, you know, sometimes it didn't work out, and that's okay. And then sometimes it was really great. But there was always a shift in culture, depending on kind of who was appointed into a leadership role. And we did have one scenario where there was suddenly a sense of presenteeism where we had to be in the office. And if you weren't in the office, you probably weren't working. And after, I've been there 5 years, my team were, I'd raised £2 million in crowdfund as part of the Series A, £10 million Series A. My teammate had won multiple awards. She was constantly winning Employee of the Month. We were doing all this amazing stuff, rebranded, and yet we had this one-to-one. And the question I got was, "Oh, you really need to decide where you're going to be, whether it's Cornwall or London." I said, "Cornwall." And he was like, "Well, I need you here." I was like, "Well, why? Show me the proof that you need me here when I've spent 5 years delivering remotely and it's fine." And so it was a
100%.
real conversation. It had to be a sort of almost me coaching, but every time that happens as employees, it knocks you sideways a bit because you have to reprove yourself. And that's the sort of thing that leads to things like imposter syndrome or, not feeling enough. And then people move on because they're tired of constantly having to prove that they can work remotely when they've been doing it successfully, for such a long time. And that is, it comes from leadership. You should go and work remotely as a leader to prove to your staff that that's okay.
Oh, wow. This is amazing. And I think I'm hoping that people are listening to this, especially those who are conflicted, whether they should go to an office and actually even pay to be in an office where they might not be the priorities and how they want to spend the money. And I'm glad of what you've shared, especially how much you've raised by working remotely. And I think, I did a workshop in Valencia in Spain for a remote company. There was one of the remote gathering, and it was pretty much how do we work remotely in terms of looking at processes, streamlining, running pilots, and so many other things along those lines. And as you've rightly said, it's really about the DNA and the culture and management. Usually when we look at the lack of productivity, people jump to look at things that because we're not in the office or because we don't have enough people. But really think a little bit about whether you have even built trust in your company, right?
Exactly.
And how do you make sure that you are not eroding trust through things like the question you've been asked, because it's like, okay, so I've done all of this, but you still don't trust me. So I think, yes, it's really important that management and leadership can really think a little bit more about how they how they structure their organization and how they grow the culture within the company to make sure that they can move forward. Now, one thing I also want to touch on is Slush'd, right? The conference. And just to let everybody know, because I'm super excited, I will be running a session on Test It and They Will Come, I think. And I think this is such a great topic. I'm not even going to pretend I came up with the name because Nikki and the team was fantastic. I heard that title and I thought that's exactly what I say to so many people. They have an idea, they want to hide behind creating a product and hoping that when they will open the door, clients will line up. But that's not how the world works. So what should you do instead, and how can you do it differently? I'm not going to say more on that, just to keep that for the conference. So Nikki, can you please tell us a little bit more about Slush? Because I believe this is one of the first ever Slush conferences in the UK, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Slush themselves, I like that. Slush themselves, basically, much like TED had TEDx events, they tasked themselves with getting Slush out to the rest of the world. And you have to pitch, and they deliberately award it to communities where startup support is minimal, or they've got a particular challenge that the Slush branding and coaching from the Slush team could actually help. And so we went through this competitive pitch process. Hilariously, we didn't actually get it. Liverpool did.
Wow.
And I went to bed that night really disappointed, and the feedback was amazing. We've got this email, and they're like, "You're really close." And I went to bed, and they booked in a feedback session for us so we could have a conversation. And I thought, I'm not going to take no for an answer on this. And thankfully, my colleague Holly woke up the next day and she said, "Yeah, I thought the same thing." So we went into the feedback session, and Holly said, "Well, actually, would Liverpool like to twin with us? We've actually got really similar pain points, almost the same pain points. We're both on the west coast of the UK. We were both the recipient of many years of ERDF EU funding, which has come to an end. The startup support because of that completely dried up. And we're all on the border of other major cities that tend to get the spotlight more than us. And so when we had this conversation, our counterpart Johnny in Liverpool said, "Yeah, let's do a Reading Leeds Festival style event. We'll do it on the same day. we'll have this major startup thing, and we'll be north-south divide, and that's what we've done. So we've been working with Johnny and his team in Liverpool, to build 2 really different but really awesome speaker lineups on an event to bring Slush to the UK for the first time. So it's had an even bigger impact, bigger than we could have imagined, across the UK, because from wherever you are in the UK, you should be able to reach a Slush event on that day within about 4 hours. So
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and just for those who don't know about Slush, where does he actually come from, Slush?
So it originated in Helsinki in almost about 20 years ago now, and it started as an event with about 120 people, as just founders and entrepreneurs and visionaries, people that were thinking about starting a business. And it started with a bit of a pitch competition. There were a couple of investors in the room, and basically it spiraled. I think it was 2003 was their first event. It spiraled, and then in about 2018, they had about 25,000 people through the door. Wow. So they've scaled it back, and they deliberately started to lock tickets now at about 10 to 12,000. So last year they got 12,000 people in, and it's a mixture of founders and investors. And their whole ethos is it's based in Helsinki in Finland, and which is not where you would think the startup capital of Europe is. And it's deliberately done in the winter, in the snow. It's very dark. There's lots of lights, and it's a really cool environment. And that's why it's called Slush. So you can go and have a pitch to investors, go and have a conversation with a budding entrepreneur, and then you can get a hot tub in the snow all on the same day, or go and have a cold dip in an ice bath if you want. So the whole culture is just fun and vibrant, but it's an amazing place to network. And the Helsinki event is responsible for billions of pounds worth of investment for startups. So it's an amazing networking opportunity for anyone that can go.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I also love the fact that they've decided that, well, if you don't want to make it all the way to Helsinki and you want to have something high caliber locally, then why not have one it joins Liverpool Cornwall events. And I'm definitely excited to actually be attending the Cornwall events. And, it's my first time even in Cornwall. I've never made it that far. I've made it to Devon once, but that's a little further. So it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And for our audience out there, what is the theme of the conference?
So we've got sort of 3 key themes really for this, and our objectives are very much aligned with Liverpool. So the first one is using the tech sector as a means of regeneration and levelling up in the northwest and southwest. The second is equipping founders to think globally and win in global markets. We're really good at being local as startups, but actually those connections come so much more when we turn outwards and shout louder. And then positioning Liverpool and Cornwall as a global tech location. So we attract high growth startups, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, and of course that most important, investment and business support as well. And the program we've built around that. So we've got pitch startup competition in the morning. We had 40 submissions for pitches locally, and we're going to get that down to about 9. So those are being reviewed at the moment. Then we've got a brilliant keynote speaker. So Dominic McGregor, who was the co-founder of Social Chain with Steve Bartlett, is coming all the way down to Cornwall to talk to our audience about his experience in the startup journey. He's got an incredible story. If you don't know who he is, go and have a listen. Steve Bartlett's podcast, Diary of a CEO, is a massive one on Spotify, and Dominic was about episode 10. So he was one of the sort of first podcasts as well. So go and have a listen to that if you want to find out kind of more, make your mouth water a bit. And then we go through startups and speakers. So our awesome Naily is covering Build It and They Will Come, I think. So it's about market validation. In tech, we really love to just build and then stick all the bells and whistles on and hope there's an audience for it. So it's challenging that. And then we go through things like storytelling, pitching, why your story is more important than the features of your product. Yes. We go through fundraising, other types of fundraising, but also how to just build a profitable business where you might not need investment. You can just get customers. And then we go through a little bit of growth hacking. We talk about people and culture. We go through some success stories, and also why the exit isn't always the end, which many founders know. Sometimes you think you've exited, but actually you're contracted for 3 years in. Or I've got a story of one entrepreneur who's coming to speak who sold his company and then bought it back. So it's the reality. Yes. Of like what you think the exit is. And I've called the whole session a unicorn is just a horse in a party hat, because everyone thinks it's this like, oh, you sign the contract, you take your check, and then you buy your yacht and sail around the world. It rarely ends like that. So it's, and
funny enough as well, there's actually a lot more small businesses. There's a lot more small businesses run than large businesses, and there's more sustainable startups that might not have been unicorn, but that are actually profitable and are run really well. Yet in the news, there's always this pressure, because of course there's the unicorn get a lot more coverage. It's such an exciting story to tell, I guess, or to spin, that you hear about that. So I'm so glad that you're actually bringing that in the face of startups, especially first-time founders that have all this huge pressure of going from an idea to running as fast as they can to become a unicorn.
Exactly. And there's also things like employee ownership. You can leave your business, but you can leave it to your employees. There are other ways. Things have moved on a lot, from writing checks and things happening in boardrooms, and that's really the light we want to shine. So it should be a really enjoyable event.
Okay, brilliant. So before we kind of go and talk a little bit more about your own experiences working in startups and until where you are now, because I'm sure there's going to be even more great advices. You've already shared quite a few, especially when it comes to the teams and culture and more. Let's have a quick fire round questions, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to just ask you a few questions. Just give us a little bit. You don't have to go very deep on everything. Unless
okay.
sometimes I even forget myself and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I go in there. So let's get it going. So first question, early bird or night owl?
Oh, it depends. I think at the moment, night owl, definitely night owl, not early bird.
Brilliant.
It does shift, but night owl, definitely at the moment.
Second, coffee or tea?
At the moment, coffee, but normally tea. I'm very flaky.
Now, would you go for Yorkshire tea?
I did. If I'm having a full caffeinated tea, I will always go for Yorkshire tea. But yeah, I drink decaf at the moment. So just, coffee makes me wired.
Oh, brilliant. So one that's a little bit more difficult. One mistake you've made that founders should watch out for?
Ooh, one. There's millions. I think probably, in fact, this is one I was talking to somebody about the other day with my marketing hat on. In the very early stages, we'd raised some seed funding and we did an announcement about it. And whilst it got us some PR, it also tells everybody that suddenly you've got some money. And so you get a lot of emails from a lot of companies trying to sell you their services. And I got really blindsided by this PR agency that I was like, oh, these guys are amazing. And they made all these awesome promises about the amount of coverage we could get. And, as a lot of people are, a lot of marketing people in startups are, they're usually the sole marketing person. So there's very few ideas to bounce ideas or anything like that. And I had a tiny marketing budget and I convinced our CEO that this is a really good idea, where they charged me £7,000 for 7 pieces of coverage. And
wow.
For a startup, this was an awful lot of money. And bear in mind, I'd been working to my budget normally was like that for the entire year. And I thought this was really great. And honestly, I regretted it after about the 3rd piece of coverage. I was like, this is a really, really terrible idea. When I saw a sort of teeny tiny piece or what they were pitching, and this is absolutely no disrespect to PR companies, but as a startup, we were just wrong. They were at a different level. We shouldn't have been there. And after that happened, and I got my 7 pieces of coverage, and we paid the invoice, and I said goodbye to the cash. I thought a bit more creatively about how we would do PR and started harnessing LinkedIn more, and almost doing a bit of a work out loud process with the founder and myself and a couple of sort of the senior members of the team. And while we were crowdfunding, it happened to be a time where Richard Branson had released his latest book, and he was doing a book launch in London. And it was a week I was working in London. So I was like, right, we're going to the book launch. So I brought the founder and I a ticket. And at the same time, he had a website, and it was a part of the Virgin Money Media website, where he was posting founder stories. And I shared a story on there that they published. And it was about being an entrepreneur, and it was how to make the boat go faster, which the Olympic team talk a lot about. There's a book called How to Make the Boat Go Faster. We'd read it and I'd applied it. I was like, this is great. And he tweeted our article with the hashtag read by Richard. So he goes to his own website to read some of the stuff. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So I posted that fact on LinkedIn with a photo of the founder and I holding his book and our ticket for this event to say, oh, we can't wait to see you at this book signing. He commented then on that LinkedIn post.
Wow. Yeah.
And the post immediately hit 1 million views. Just because Richard Branson commented on it. And thank goodness I posted our crowdfunding link within the post, as I did with every post during that time. And it didn't smash it, but there was a big peak in our crowdfunding of money trickling in, simply because Branson had commented on this post. And that was free. And it was one of those moments I was like, oh, this is what we should be doing. And all we were doing was talking out loud. And I paid nobody for that. And it got us far more coverage than 7 grand has got us. So that was a big lesson for me in that kind of early startup phase, especially when you finally got a budget.
Yeah, that's impressive. I need to bring you back and really start looking at PR and marketing strategy, because there's so many other startups out there that really worried about their budget not going further when it comes to marketing and PR. Yet this simple hack got you discovered. So that's amazing. Congratulations. Oh gosh, the day where I will get Richard Branson to send me a message, I think I will eat an entire box of celebration chocolate on my own, minus Mars, because I don't like Mars.
I'll be with you, Naily. I've got you on the Mars, don't worry.
Brilliant. I'll send some to Cornwall.
Honestly.
Wow. So the best professional day of your life.
This is a really hard question, because there are so many peaks and troughs in startup world, and even in your professional life. And often it's easy to either look back with rose-tinted glasses or look back and only remember some of the bad things. And I had a real think about this, and I can't necessarily remember the best day, but there were a couple of moments. And you would think it would be when we'd like closed our fundraising or won an award or done something awesome. But I've got a hilarious one that stood out in my mind where we finally got a little bit of money and we wanted to thank our teams. I think we had about 30 or 40 of us at this point. And we had an office that was right on the Thames in London. And this is a bit of a startup hack, not because we could afford it, but because a load of lawyers had moved out of this business, out of this building, and they were renovating it from top to bottom. And so we as a startup said, well, can we rent the space that you haven't renovated yet? And then we'll just move around the building until you finally renovate everywhere and kick us out. So we got really discounted rent, literally on the Thames at London Bridge, looking over the water. I had the Shard as my view. And we were paying nothing to it because we were in this crumbling office in a building that were renovating. So that is a little startup tip for you, is always say, look, we'll rough it. And so we decided we were going to hire a boat on the Thames and take our team out for a social on a Friday night. And we invited our chairman of the board, who's a guy called James Cameron, who is really big in climate change. We were a clean tech company. He's an amazing, amazing man and so supportive of us. And we got on this boat at 5 o'clock, whatever it was, and sailed off. And we brought a karaoke machine, and we put on some drinks. And the team started sort of celebrating everything. And it was the realization for James that he couldn't get off the boat. And so he's on this boat with a bunch of startup entrepreneurs, software developers, and us lot, and he's the chairman of the board. And he kind of had this moment of like, okay, I'm stuck here until 9 o'clock because they're not going to talk and let me off. And he just took off his hat, picked up a drink, and then he got involved in the karaoke. And I'll always remember that, because it was the first time that we could really give back to our team and just say, yeah, let's go and let our hair down, celebrate. Can we buy you some drinks? Let's go and have some fun. But also the reality of the board chairman, who was just tied into us. And in this sort of parallel world, he'd come from all this like global climate change law and all these amazing things. And here he is, hanging out with us idiots on a Friday night on the
with the karaoke as well.
Exactly. But he was a great sport, always is. So that was one of those moments that really stood out. It's just a nice moment to say, look, thanks for the team. We're getting there.
Yeah. And again, there's a theme through your stories. It's really about simplicity. Sometimes can be the key to doing way more than you think you could, just because you don't have the money, but you have the creativity and you have the desire of doing something good for you, for the team, to grow. So that's kind of impressive. So the last question on this quick fire question is, if you can name 3 of your favorite tools that you use when you work.
Well, the obvious 3 for me that I use daily are Trello, Slack, and Canva. And we run most of the business on those 3 tools. But I can't not give a mention to ChatGPT, Midjourney, and DALL-E, because we can't say that we don't use them, because we do. But my favorite sort of one that is really underrated, and I realize this is more than 3, but I feel like Slack and Trello
Go
and
for
Canva are the
it.
really obvious ones. But there's an app called Pocket. And I think the URL for it is Get Pocket. It's so underrated. You obviously know it. Pocket allows you to save links and bookmarks of things that you want to come back to and read later. But when you go back to it and read it later, it strips all of the adverts out and just presents it on a app, on a mobile app, or even the web app's beautiful, on a really beautiful, completely simplistic way of just reading it back. So it strips out all the rubbish, all the distractions. So you've got completely distraction-free reading. And I use it all the time. You can also tag and save things, create folders. You can share these with your team. So we subscribe a lot to RSS feeds to find out what our members are doing, things like that. And actually, if you tee that up with RSS feeds, you just get a really noise-free reading session. And I've used it probably since about 2011. And I haven't gone to another app since. And they brilliantly, because we love to tweak things in tech, because we need things to do when we built the perfect product, they haven't touched it. So they haven't tried to make it better. They haven't messed with it to make it completely unusable. It still works as well as it did. So that's one of my sort of favorites, really, especially if I've sat on a train, because you can download locally as well. So if you haven't got Wi-Fi, you can go and read all your articles on there. So yeah, Get Pocket is the app.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I would definitely say it's one of these underrated apps, because I use it every day and I've used it for several years, yet I never really think about that because it's so part of my life that I forget that is actually enough. And yes, sometimes I just get frustrated because now, not ever since SEO is what it is now, articles are much longer. If you want to ask something really, how do I do XYZ? The first paragraph will be, let me tell you a story about XYZ. And by the time you get there, there's so much that you don't need. And because you have adverts and pop-ups, it's difficult to focus, finish reading something without a distraction or going somewhere else. So yes, I think for me, if I didn't have Pocket, I'd probably be frustrated every day. And even some news articles, just read it on Pocket because it's so much better. So thank you so much for sharing your favorite tools, because there's a lot out there that you've mentioned that other entrepreneurs might never have heard of, especially Pocket, and they might just go and try it. So just to finish off this interview, just as a quick recap, do remember to check out Slush'd Software Cornwall, happening on Thursday, the 14th of September. And if you are watching this afterwards, then you completely miss out, and just reach out to Software Cornwall because you could have missed one of the best conferences in the UK. And I'm sure that they will either give you links on whether they have catch up all the rest, or even how other links, so that you don't miss out other events that's happening in Cornwall and also in the UK. Now, Nikki, we want to find out a little bit about you, because obviously, as you are sharing your experience, we know, as we're listening to all of the amazing things that you've done. But how did you end up in startups in the first place, and then decided, no, I want to go on the other side and support the entire ecosystem, not just one startup?
So I started my career, and this is worth noting as well. So I went to university, and my degree is event management, which is really not a lot to do with startups. But my university life was really good. It got me out of kind of a very small village at home, and I made some really great connections. And it took me to Sheffield, and I grew up in sort of East Anglia. So Sheffield for me was a really great sort of city to live in. And my first job out of university, I worked for kind of a live music venue up there, which was a really great job. But then I found my way into digital for a company that did user experience design. And this is where I realized at 21 or 22, however old I was at the time, that there were actually jobs in digital, which it wasn't really a known thing then, that people, I knew you could go build websites and things, but actually there was this whole ecosystem behind tech and digital that I had no idea about. And I happened to work for an agency who had one of the best company cultures of any company I've still ever worked for. They just got innovation and also collaboration, and did it genuinely, and it was organic. It came from the team, not leadership. And they were a team of about 100 people, and so that's not an easy feat in a company of that size. And I remember my standout lesson for them is when they did sort of weekly, we called them festival sessions. So instead of letting sort of everyone go early on a Friday at 4:00, between 4 and 5, everyone would down tools, and we'd do a festival session, either together or somebody would present something. We do 4 different topics. And leadership, then the MD, she would down tools and she would come and join us, and they put some beers on and we'd have a beer. And I remember thinking, that is leadership. That is actually leading by example in the most important way. And since then, with each company I've worked with, I've tried to kind of install that and bring that to the table with some of their other policies. And because of that kind of, I had a couple of roles within that agency at the time. I then, I'd been there a couple of years. That company got acquired by Capita. So it had gone from then a very boutique, gorgeous agency to within a year, it changed quite a lot after the acquisition. And as things do when acquisitions happen, a lot of people leave and the company changes, the culture's not as good anymore. So, and it was around that time, my brother had founded a consultancy in a programming in a software language called LabVIEW, which wasn't very well known in the UK at the time. It's a graphical programming language. To most people, it looks like a tube map with lots of tube stops. And
yes, I actually used LabVIEW before.
Say that again, Naily?
I've used LabVIEW before as well. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. It's such a great store, but yeah, it's been ages since I've even heard someone mention the name.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a massive user group in Cambridge, so it's one of the biggest user groups in the UK. And at this time, you had to be a certified LabVIEW architect to code in it. And my brother had gone out to get a certification. He got his co-founder to get it, and then one more contractor to get it. And suddenly they were the highest certified programming LabVIEW language in the UK, creating software. And the guy, he was like 23 at the time. And I remember having a less than an inspiring day at work, and that we'd gone through a project and it had all changed and things had just not worked out. And I left work really sad on a Friday thinking, I think it's time for me to move on. I'm not getting more out of this job. And I had a voicemail from him saying, if you did ever want to come and work for me, I think I could afford to pay you now. So I've been working for him every sort of evenings and weekends, just helping him out with last minute presentations. And so he and I kind of embarked on this journey to sort of grow this software consultancy. And then in there, we did a project for Formula One company, which is all about kind of high-speed data acquisition. And at the similar time, we got a lead from somebody looking after a wind farm who needed lots of data and environment monitoring. And we looked at the data that the energy side of things had, which was sparse, to say the least. And then looked at the awesome speed and the stuff that we were getting from Formula One, which was very cutting edge and innovative, and said, well, what energy needed is some of this. And so we started to move over into the energy space. And that's where we then had this spin-out company called Verve. And it was all about energy monitoring. And we started off doing this in hotels and restaurants, places that had lots of sites, because we could monitor the energy usage in a building and tell them how much that fridge was costing, or that oven or coffee machine, whatever it was. And then we got seed funding from British Gas, from Ignite, their investment arm, who said, look, this is really great for businesses, but can you go and do it in homes? Because at the time there was a big smart meter rollout, and smart meters, as anyone who knows who's got them, are pretty useless. It's no good getting to the end of the day and they say, well, you spent £7. And you go, great, how? And they're like, I don't know.
What do I do about it?
So they said, well, go and do this for homes. And that's what we did. So the next 6 years, there were a few pivots. We managed to disaggregate energy usage in homes, so we could tell you as soon as you flicked your kettle on how much that cup of tea was costing you, or coffee, or how much your washing machine was costing, to the point where we could see such granular data that we could tell you if your fridge had a leak in it because it was using more energy to stay cool. And of course, we're all about sort of sustainability and climate change and reducing energy. This was set to save people thousands of pounds in their energy bills. And then we've pivoted multiple times. So we then got into the sort of the solar panel battery space, and we said, well, we can see what energy you're saving at home, then actually we should be able to see what your solar panels are generating and what your battery's doing. Oh, and actually, why should you send that back to the grid when you should sell it to your neighbour? So we got into the blockchain space and tried to decentralize everything. And then we did the first trade of energy on the blockchain in the UK. And so we then pivoted again. And the company, I'm pleased to say, is still going strong. So my brother and I left at the end of 2019, just before the pandemic, funny enough. And then it carried on for another year. The pandemic knocked it sideways a few times. It pivoted a few more times. He's back in running it again. But at that point, I then found the Software Cornwall team and sort of cemented roles here. But yeah, it's still going strong. And it was 6 years of a really interesting journey. But it taught me an awful lot. And I think probably a piece of advice that I learned is, don't be blindsided by somebody else thinking that they know more about your business than you do, because you are the expert on your business. But it's really easy to get blindsided by a flashy CV or someone who says they've been there multiple times, or often people have never done it themselves, but they're part of your investing group. That it's really, really common that you are the expert of your product if you invented it. So try not to be blindsided by people who think you can do it better than you, because as you'll hear when you come to Slush, it's not always the case. And sometimes when you exit a couple of years later, that company doesn't exist. And that was my first experience. The company Capital bought doesn't exist anymore, because no one could run it quite like the founder. So yeah, parting words.
Wow, that's brilliant. And thanks again for sharing. That's such an incredible story and journey. One from pretty much everything that we've been talking about, that's going to happen even more. I mean, if you enjoy this episode, you definitely need to go to Slush'd Cornwall, because they are going to expand on so many of the topics that we covered today. And even just this idea of getting into a career in tech from where you were before, and all the way to being part of running a startup, exiting and going back in, and there's so many things that just happen. And again, one of the wonderful messages that I'm taking from there as well, especially for startup founders, is the idea of pivoting. You have an idea, and your idea is, I say a lot on the podcast, to be like a child. It grows and evolves and change. And as you can pivot based on what's happening in the market, based on new ideas and clients, but still knowing what your core is, then you'll be able to continue moving forward. So Nikki, thanks so much for sharing this advice for us. I think for me, you are the gift that keeps on giving, because I ask you one question and you got so many great insight and advice. So it's been such a wonderful episode, and I'm so glad to have you on as a guest on the podcast. So for those out there who want to find out, they're so excited, really want to find out more about Software Cornwall, and even more importantly, get ticket for Slush'd Cornwall, where should they go?
So tickets selling fast. They are free, so grab them while they're hot. So it's startupcornwall.co.uk. We'll take you to the event website. We're planning on it being an annual event. So if you do miss out this year, keep an eye out. Sign up to the newsletter, because I can't see us going away for long. We'll be back for sure. But also, if you're kind of looking at what's going on in the Cornish tech cluster, softwarecornwall.org. We're here all the time. We do lots of events, lots of programs, lots of stuff to get kids excited about coding. So come and check out what we do. We're always up for collaborating and sharing knowledge. So yeah, hit us up. You can find me on LinkedIn. So yeah, really keen to talk to anybody who wants to get involved. And if not, we'll see you at Slush.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. And we are also going to put the link to the ticket sales and also the website on the show. So if you are listening to this, wherever you are on whichever platform, check the show notes, and I'm sure you're going to get the links of Startup Cornwall and also for the Slush'd Cornwall events. Thank you so much for being on the show. And again, to all of our founders out there, entrepreneurs, and everybody in the tech community. And if you are not in the community and thinking about joining in, then yes, go to the conference. And yes, we've said a lot about transitioning. And please do remember that as entrepreneurs in the tech community, we do need a home and a community. And there are community out there closer to your house than you think. And even if you are working remotely, there are ways that we are now committed, or linked together, committed with the way that we are linked together in the community. So do not struggle on your own, and don't be alone. And do remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.